Welcome to Culture, Religion, and Technology. I'm Bambi Francisco Roizen. Well, Pulpit AI was founded in 2023 to help pastors with content creation and distribution. It was then acquired by Subsplash in 2024, and then Subsplash was acquired by Roper Technologies for $800 million this past summer. Well, joining me to talk about Pulpit AI and the future of faith and AI is Michael Whittle. He is the founder of Pulpit AI and VP of AI at Subsplash. Michael, welcome.
Hey, Bambi, it's good to be here.
Well, congrats on finding a company and then going through two acquisitions.
Thank you.
That can be quite disruptive. But let's start with why you founded Pulpit AI in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So I didn't grow up in a Christian home. Became a Christian when I was 13 years old, 14 years old, pretty radically, and have just kind of always been local church and in some form of ministry. So have just always loved building the local church and have always done bivocational ministry. So always worked kind of as an entrepreneur, but then have always been a pastor. And so planted a church in 2015 in Los Angeles, California, with some of my best friends. And honestly, for me, Pulpit AI was it was I don't want to say an accident because it was sort of I would say how quickly it launched and grew was a bit more of the accident. But yeah, I mean, I really just, to be honest, pastoring a bunch of young people during COVID and 2020 and all the craziness of the world then, I just even began to believe more in the voice of the local church pastor. And the majority of churches in the US are under 100 people. They don't have big staffs and media teams, but now their people are spending, gosh, some would say 30, 40 times more per week on their digital device than they are in a church, right? And so for me, it was just about amplifying the voice of the local church pastor. Like, I'm a big believer in that voice being needed in culture today. And so when we started looking at the space, it really was, the first idea was, hey, could a pastor upload an audio version of their sermon and have AI turn that into things like discussion questions for small groups or devotionals that they could send to their congregation throughout the week. So honestly, it was just to help pastors connect to their church during the week, and especially for some of those smaller church pastors, be able to, for lack of a better term, compete, with sort of the Christian influencers that I was seeing on TikTok and social
Mhm.
media and all that kind of stuff. So that was honestly it. It was a passion for the local church and a passion to help pastors, and just kind of came out of our own, what we were building in LA and some of the problems we were trying to solve.
That's interesting because I remember I spoke with somebody who started pastors.ai and they were
Yeah.
looking for something similar, but you had sort of a,
Is that Joe? Joe
yeah,
is his name? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I know Joe. Yeah, great guy.
Are you guys doing similar things?
So I think there's like a bit of a difference, but yeah, we met like super early on. Yeah, we connected a couple years ago actually. Yeah, he's a great guy.
So, but that wasn't the tw couple years ago was when you started your company. So his platform wasn't very useful for yours. Is that what you're saying? Because you had to
I
build your own.
I think we both kind of came out around the same time, and like I think one of us sent the other one a message on Twitter and was just like, "Hey, you're building in this kind of random church technology space. I am. Let's just connect." And so I
Yeah.
think we actually launched right around the same time.
There is a cohort of companies that started maybe as apps for to amplify just biblical, just pastoral voices, not necessarily to be CRMs for churches, but there's hallow.com, pray.com, abide, and pray.com also has AI and they support a lot of churches. Did you look at a pray.com and said that wasn't sufficient, or they weren't doing what you needed?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I know that the crew from pray.com really like those guys. Yeah, for us it was I think the reality of those big platforms like that, um they're not so local church based, right? So for me, and I love the pray.coms and I love what they're doing. Back then they were even less so focused on kind of what's happening in the local church, I believe. And yeah, for me, it was just about like, the pastor of 150 people in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky is not reaching people on pray.com. They're trying to reach their church. You know what I mean? And so for me, it was just like, hey, the local church itself, not a celebrity pastor, not Christian media, but like the pastor with 100 people, how do they reach their congregation during the week? So for me, that was just our passion. I had obviously knew of all of those guys and had actually really followed. I think that it was sort of that like post COVID where I think like Andreessen invested a bunch of money into one of those apps. Like it was like this thing where
Right,
everyone was talking about.
right.
And so that was sort of more consumer focused, I would say. I was really just like, how do we help the church,
Makes a lot
individually?
of sense. And you keep talking about the churches that have 100 or less in congregants. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that's half of the churches out there, 200,000. There's about 460,000, 500,000 churches, and half of them have 100 or fewer going to church. So those were the ones you were going after, just the sort of the real long tail, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it was an opportunity. It was for the first time a pastor of a small church with not a lot of resources could produce media similar to that of a mega church with a big media team. And so for me, it was, as someone who was building a church in LA, and it was a good sized church, but we're in LA, things are expensive. We're renting venues, like we don't have money to spend on a team of 4 people to do our social media. So for me, it was like, or content creation. So yeah, I was really just thinking about that small to medium sized church. I think today it's like I think the average church size of a Pulpit AI user is like between 200 and 300. So still in that what would be considered a small to medium size church.
So how did you get it out there? How were you able to market it with such a small team?
Yeah. So my background is in advertising and media. So and back in 2014, actually was a partner in a company that launched pretty virally, sort of accidentally. And so I kind of knew it's like not very often as an entrepreneur you get an opportunity for something like that to happen. So with Pulpit AI, I literally was just building it. Thought 25 of my friends were going to use it, and tweeted out about it one night to my 500 followers, and woke up the next morning and it had gone totally viral. And I'm like, I think I woke up that first morning and like 1,000 pastors had signed up for the wait list. I've got the New York Times DMing me and Fox News and all these seminary. It was just like, okay, this is
Wow.
wild. And having a media background, you sort of know like this doesn't happen very often. So I was actually building another business at the time, and literally called those investors and said, "Hey, like this thing is struggling. This thing is obviously not going how we want it to go. Like
Yeah.
we're gonna like as of today, we're gonna completely pivot to build this thing full time."
And
And
did
and
you have a product before you put it out there? Did you
no,
or
we were building the product. Yeah, so the product was being built. In fact, I built the landing page because I was getting impatient with how long it was taking the product to get built. And yeah, so it was just for me, I love product building, but I've just always been a distribution guy. And so for me it was like, hey, let's just, yeah, for me I thought it was important for us to be the first. And so
so
yeah, we
what
just
did you
built a landing. Go ahead.
how did you market it? What did you say you could do for these churches?
I mean, I think the first like slogan was like supercharge your sermon. I think we said like, turn one sermon into unlimited content. And basically and look, I think the reality is it solved actually a very real problem for pastors, which was a pastor spends 8, 10, 12, some of them 20 hours a week preaching a sermon or preparing a sermon. They then preach that sermon in front of, a quarter of their congregation. And then
Sure.
that sermon just kind of goes nowhere. And so for me, it was just sort of like, hey, your sermon can now live on Monday through Friday without a big media team. And I think that was just like sparked. And because my background is ministry, I just knew all the use cases that myself and my friends who were pastors really wanted to be able to apply into our churches. And it was honestly just like they use that term founder market fit that they use a lot, and it
Right.
was honestly just kind of the perfect storm, like just the perfect amalgamation of like things that I loved and was interested in, as well as like what I had experience in from a background perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then going viral really helps,
Sure, sure. Obviously we need, yes. And that's insane having 500 followers and going viral, but clearly you tapped it. I think it was some of the words that you said, maybe in one sermon to 100 clips or something like that, or
Totally. And early on there was a really large um, blogger. I think she is maybe an Episcopalian theologian or something. she misread what we were going to do and thought that we were going to write sermons for pastors. And so
Oh,
she like retweeted it, amplified it. And so
mhm,
like the first 24 hours was like not people loving what we were doing. It was people thinking that like I was getting memes made at me saying what we were doing was demonic, and
mm,
publishers from some of the largest Christian publishers messaged me and I'm like, "Wait, okay, first of all, we're not writing sermons for pastors.
right.
Second of all, like I didn't even realize there was this big theological debate on that was happening in the church world. And honestly, at the time, the debate wasn't happening in the church world. The debate was happening in the world of Christian academia, and those are actually very two different worlds that I've begun to really learn and understand. So, anyways, yeah, I just went for it, and had some friends who had some large followings in the space that trusted in me and believed in me, and I said, hey, can you help me continue to get the word out? So
Sure, sure. But at the end of the day, it's all about the product. I mean, you could do so much marketing, but there's got to be something there. And what was it for startup entrepreneurs who want to know, what was I mean, clearly it must have been some MVP even because you were still building it while you were marketing to people. You had this huge wait.
yeah.
But what was it that essentially got out there as your product?
Yeah, so the first iteration of the product was the first iteration of the product was I started having pastors send me their sermon. I went on Twitter because the product still wasn't done yet, but I
Mhm.
was like getting all this attention. And so I went on Twitter one Sunday morning and I said, "Hey pastors, here's my email. After you're done today, send me a audio file of your sermon. I will run this through what we're building that's not customer ready yet, and I will send you all of this content to your email by first thing Monday morning." And I just did that. So that was like the first iteration of it for free. And then I think about 8 or 9 weeks, maybe 3 months later, we launched kind of like our first version of it, which was literally upload an audio file of your sermon. We would upload that audio file. You could upload that audio file and would automatically turn that sermon into, I think it was discussion questions, a blog post, an email newsletter, a social media post, and a devotional. And that was literally that was it.
That's great. I mean,
Yeah.
that's enough to, I mean, honestly, we started using Substack and I upload videos. I'll upload this and it spits out 3 or 4 clips. I don't even look at, I just say, oh, kind of looks good, whatever. And it goes out to,
Mm-hmm.
which is great because then I don't have to do it. So I could see
Right.
the value in that. I mean, I wish they could do more of what you're doing, but I'm sure they'll add that in eventually. So
Yeah.
sounds like Subsplash, which ended up acquiring your company, sounds like they had the mega churches, you had the small, you had the long tail churches, and you were a complement. How did that come about?
Yeah. So, yes, Subsplash has been around for 20 years. Founders, guy named Tim Turner, who's just an incredible guy. And, um, yeah, I don't even know how they heard about us. I guess just through, you know, being out there or whatever. And they reached out to me about a year, like right as we were coming out of beta. So we were in beta for about 8 months and worked with a couple hundred churches. And then, yeah, it's funny. They reached out to me on the same day in the early summer of 2024 that probably the largest venture capital investor in the world reached out to me. So like I'm in Canada, middle of nowhere with my wife's family, and I like wake up and I have this company reaching out and these investors reaching out, and I had a series of conversations with Subsplash super early on, and was like not gonna sell. It was like way too early. I wanted to go build something for the next 10 years, and then yeah, just over the course of like 3 or 4 months, first and foremost, I actually really loved them. I love their heart for the church. I love their mission, um, and that was kind of the first step. And just yeah, after probably 3 or 4 months of conversations, we officially got acquired by them. One thing I was really super interested in with them is they've been around 20 years and they serve 20,000 churches, and so for me it was a great opportunity for distribution. But because Subsplash is so media centric, like their churches were our perfect user
Well,
base. In fact, we had without knowing it, we had quite a few of our users that were also using Subsplash.
oh,
And so yeah, it made a ton of sense. And they, Subsplash reach it. I mean, they have everything from very large mega churches to again small churches, 100 people and under across the whole swath of churches they serve. But yeah, it just made a lot of sense. And the biggest thing for me was it was like we were value aligned, and but it was
what were
wild.
you
It was
doing
it
that
was a
they
big
weren't,
difficult. Go ahead.
what were you doing that they weren't able to do?
Yeah. So at the time, it was the content creation, right? So if you think about Subsplash as basically a full stack um, software for churches, everything from live streaming all the way to content creation, all the way to end user applications. For us, one of the main things was we had built a kind of a proprietary engine that edited sermon clips
Mm.
from sermons. Um, and we specifically built that to kind of extract, being a preacher and a teacher myself, it was important for me that we would represent the pastor's idea as best we could and train the AI to do that. So they liked that. Obviously, we were growing fast. I mean, we were growing, you know, uh, 50, 60% a month, at the time. And it was really just that AI generated, like it just made perfect sense. And then when you start talking about the amount of sermons that Subsplash has in terms of data, right? Churches have been uploading their sermons to Subsplash's platform for 20 years now. And so kind of in this whole like world of AI in the church tech, I just really felt honestly compelled to partner with someone who had, a lot of authority in the space, and really who had the infrastructure to like really kind of like be the leader in AI in church tech. And so, yeah, that was
Also, you could take your platform and go after all of the content they already had.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
They could
Exactly.
maybe even upsell that. Then I
Yes.
was going to get into your background, but let's keep going talking about the business.
Yeah.
You were acquired. Subsplash was acquired this summer, not too
That's
long
right.
after they acquired your company. Did you know that they were in talks with another company to be acquired?
From my understanding, it happened really fast. Most of the larger companies in the church tech space are owned or have been owned by private equity, in the last 5 or 6 years. And so, I had known kind of where they were in that cycle and we had talked about it. But for me, our founder, Tim, he's 100-year vision. So as we were talking about me partnering with him, it was kind of like he's not going anywhere and he has a big vision for where the company could go. So, um, yeah, I think everyone kind of knew it was a potential that it was going to happen. I think it happened a lot faster than everybody did, and the story behind it, is really cool because the company that bought us is, buy and hold forever. So they buy companies that keep the founders in place, and so it's not a situation where it's like we're getting flipped to another private equity to then have to play that game again for the next 5 or 6 years. So it really was kind of the perfect scenario.
And so, but Roper Technologies, why did they want to buy your company and pay $800 million in cash?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, having been an entrepreneur, um, and getting to kind of like go into now this bigger company. I mean, they've built an incredible business with an incredible team, people that have been around 10, 15, 20 years. The culture's amazing. They've just built a great profitable business slowly and are really like reaching a lot of churches. And I think Roper, from my understanding, Roper's investment thesis very much is we want to own category leading software companies in niche markets, you know, that are really hard to disrupt. Um,
Do
and
they help
so
you at all with distribution or R&D? Are they going to be helpful in all in that sense?
I'm honestly not really sure. I think everyone's still trying to figure it out. I mean, look, I think they own 28 or 29 companies. They're brilliant business builders, and so yeah, there's all kinds of advisory and there's all kinds of obviously great things that come from being a part of a much larger group like that. And yeah, I mean, all the resources are there, for us, just, when it comes to what are the next steps and what does that look like. But what I love about it is, one of the things they loved was they loved Tim and they loved our leadership team, and they loved like their actual passion, vision, and mission for what we're doing. And that's one of the beautiful things. And one of the reasons I was drawn to Subsplash was, sure, it's a business, but like, these guys really like love the Lord and they love the church, and they literally believe that like they're on mission from God to do this. So I think it was just all those things together that made it super attractive, for someone to buy. But I wasn't, I went from being a founder. I'm a VP. I'm not a part of those big those
Is Tim a Christian as well?
he is, yeah, yeah.
So what is the mission of your combined company? Is it to spread the gospel? Is it to help human flourishing? And then
Yeah, we want to
and
we
how do you measure success?
yeah, we want to help churches make disciples. We want to empower churches. We really believe that the hope of the world, that the greatest expression of Christ as read in the New Testament is through the expression of the local church. And we think pastors and churches are obviously, I mean, I guess the most important job there is, right? Like their job is to go out into the world, make disciples, build local churches. And so we just want to build software that serves them. So for us, it very much is like, what problems are churches facing? Obviously, as the world becomes more digital and people spend way more time on a screen than they do in person, that presents a lot of difficulties, but opportunities for churches, right? Which is, how do we engage these folks when they're not, in our church for an hour and a half on a Sunday morning? And so, yeah, the big passion for Subsplash is we just want to help. We want to help churches reach people for the gospel of Jesus. We want to focus on the technology part and help build solutions for them to solve problems they're facing. And we want to let them do the ministry part. So we're big local church. We're just, for us, it's just like, how do we use what we can do and amplify the voice of the local church?
So how do you measure that? A lot of software companies would measure usage, and you don't want to, in many ways, that conflicts with a lot of the values. You don't want kids to be on screen, at least I don't want my kids to always be
Mm,
on screen time, and yet that's what technology is built to do, is how long
right.
can we keep these people engaged? So how do you measure the success of your church clients?
Yeah, I think for us, well, I think first of all, I think one thing that's super important to know is, there are, let's say Subsplash serves 20,000 churches, right? Underneath those 20,000 churches, which are all Christian, like we serve Christian organizations, that believe in historic Christian orthodoxy and would, like that's who we serve. But I think the key is um them and their local church leadership are the ones that kind of determine, like, hey, what are we measuring? They kind of tell us, right? Like, so again, it goes to, like, we don't necessarily claim to be the experts in ministry. We claim to be the experts in building technology. And so for us, it's honestly just being around the pastors. Like, every product that we build across the board at Subsplash doesn't just come from, like, hey, wouldn't this be cool? It's literally, our people being out with clients in, hearing, hey, this is what we're trying to do. So if it's, hey, for us, it's digital engagement, right? Is it how many, how many times is someone opening an app and reading their Bible, via the Bible app that's in their church app? Or how many people are tuning into a live stream? Or how many people are serving or giving, right? Like, all of those metrics that a church would need. And then I think each individual church really determines what fruitfulness looks like, right? Like, so a lot of that's based on denomination. It's based on ministry philosophy. It's based on the pastor and their vision. So I think what we do is just try and kind of reverse engineer, like, okay, hey, churches, what do you want to see? And then how can we help make that happen? So I think church is moving towards digital engagement. It just kind of is, what it is. I think um, COVID was really difficult for in-person gatherings. I think now all the statistics show, and we're hearing this from our churches, that churches are filled again. And I was just at one of our largest partners, Southeastern University, which is, a large Christian school and university in Florida, and they had a line of college students wrapped around their campus to get into chapel, right? And a lot of those students weren't even college students. They were just there because they heard it was an amazing chapel service. So I think we're seeing churches start to fill up again, which is amazing. Um,
Now you
yeah.
see, and I know a lot of this stuff is proprietary, but I think you can aggregate a lot of these statistics to talk about how your software is enabling these churches to better disciple or make more disciples. So can you give me some statistics about how your software is helping these churches grow?
Yeah. 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 Great question. So, I mean, I think, you know, w- like, I think across the board, right? So if our software tracks everything from app downloads to giving to attendance to people who serve or check their kids into ministry, right? Like, any and all of these things, these are things that our software is helping them identify what's growing and what's not growing, right? So um, I'm not necessarily, I don't know that I would want to throw any specific, like, statistics offhand. It's like, oh, churches that use Subsplash see X amount more engagement. There's probably people on our team that could give you that much more accurately. But I think it's across things like, yeah, digital engagement, in-person attendance, giving, prayer requests that come in, kind of you name it, right? Those are all tracked by the church themselves through our software.
Got it. So for growth for your company, will you continue 20,000 churches out of, I don't know, you probably have the accurate number. I've seen 400 to 500,000
Mhm.
churches across the country. Is growth for your company going after more churches, or is it expanding out of the Christian faith? What's it
Mhm.
look like?
Yeah, so we no, we're specifically served for the Christian faith, organizations for the Christian faith. I think we do serve some nonprofits and stuff like that. Like we're obviously all about that, but our main core user is Christian churches and universities. So we are working with some universities as well. And yeah, I think we really believe that there is still a lot of people left to reach, a lot of market left to capture, so to speak, to put it in a crass business term. But yeah, we believe that there's a lot. I mean, I forget what the exact statistic is, and I'm not going to say it because I know someone will, but there's still a significant amount of churches across America that aren't using any kind of digital engagement. They're still just doing cash and check, and so they're not even taking digital giving yet. So I think that there is, and then of course, the reality is as the church continues to grow, all those resources continue to grow, and so yeah, we believe that when it comes to those serving churches with technology, we think ours is the best, and so we're just going to keep going after it. But yeah, it's across the board. We're always thinking, trying to innovate.
And so how do you compete with some of those more established companies like pray.com that's also supporting churches and supporting nonprofits, maybe even Abide, Hallow, Glorify? I know they're also
Yep.
B2C, but obviously they want to grow as well.
Yeah, so Abide, Hollow, and Glorify, I would say we wouldn't even really put ourselves in that same like category, so to speak, because those are predominantly B2C. I think, and I'm saying this about pray.com without, I mean, I know the guys, but I don't know what their like strategy is, but I think we um yeah. What was the question again? Sorry.
Oh,
Just like how,
how do you compete and differentiate from these guys?
right.
Since, yeah,
Yeah. That's great. I mean, I think without getting into, I think probably the differences in sort of our models and all that kind of stuff, I think, again, for us, from my understanding of pray.com, they reach a lot of large ministries, a lot of television ministries, a lot of pastors who are building audiences on their app, right? So, hey, we help, pastor of First Baptist Church, whatever, um, build a following on pray.com and be able to communicate with that following. So our platform is not about Subsplash or getting people to be on Subsplash. It's about the local church, right? So that local church, sure, the app is a Subsplash built app, but it's the Second Baptist Church app,
right.
right? So for us, it's like it's very focused on keeping engagement within the ecosystem of that local church. Where I think pray.com is very much they certainly are helping local churches, but they are also more of like a broad faith-based media type um,
Right,
type
right,
play.
right. People go to pray.com and to find maybe
Exactly.
more uh,
Yeah.
yeah, find more members or find donors. So let's talk a little bit about your background. This is more fun, actually. This is the
Yeah.
fun part of the interview.
No,
You
that's great.
you did not grow up in a Christian home. You became a Christian at 13, which is quite mature for you for 13. So
Mm.
I've had several 13-year-olds. I have one who is 13 right now. So that's a very mature step for you to take on your own.
Thanks.
What was that like growing up, and how did that end up happening to you at 13?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in an amazing home with amazing parents. The best of the best, when I was 13 years old, just was going through some stuff that was really, really difficult, probably something, yeah, but the most difficult part of my life thus far, right? And at the same time, I had torn my ACL playing soccer, and a friend of mine one day at school was like, "Hey, I go to this youth group on Wednesday nights. Do you want to come?" And I'm like, "Yeah, totally. Like, why not?" And yeah, show up, and it was a charismatic Pentecostal church youth service. And I mean, all I can say is like I walked in and I had an encounter with God, and my life drastically changed. Um, and from then on it was like, I mean, you could even talk to my parents. It's funny, it's like there was like the kid before that and the kid after that. And I just dove headfirst into it. I've always been kind of an extreme guy. um but yeah, it was not like a crazy come up to the altar and answer an altar call. It was literally in a praise and worship moment in this church, and I just felt the presence of the Holy Spirit, and I was just never the same, and it literally, in that instant, like, life changed. Yeah. And I
13,
was four. I think I was 14 actually. 14.
you can't really
Yeah.
drive yourself to church where you're, so you didn't really hear about the church or God or Jesus from your parents or your grandparents? Or-
We'd grow up like going to Methodist church every now and then, like, I'd like heard sermons, but it was never like a thing that we did regularly. It was, it was never something that I was like interested in. This was just kind of like, I don't know if it was just like right time, right, but then come to find out, actually, a couple of years later, what I found out was that there was a woman who lived across the street from me, and had lived across the street from me for like since I was like 3 years old. And her kitchen window would look out in front of our front yard. And so I become a Christian at this big, massive mega church. And I mean, thousands of people. And it's probably 3 or 4 months into me being a Christian. And this woman runs up to me in the church lobby. And it's this woman who lives across the street from me. And she's like, "Do you go to church here?" And I'm like, I actually just started going to church here. She's like, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, "I kind of just became a Christian." And she literally said, like, "You growing up as a kid, I would literally look out my window and pray for you as you were playing in the front yard,
What?
um, and pray that God would do something in your life and that God would touch you." And she just literally awkwardly just stood there and like wept in this church lobby.
That's
And it's just wild that, like, little things like that sort of
yeah.
make you go, man, like, God, God's always trying to, God always works something out, so.
You don't have to be involved, prayer works.
Right.
I would
Right.
tell the story about my husband's dad who was in hospice, who ended up walking out of hospice. So we joke that he's the
Wow.
person who could give a Yelp review for a hospice. But
Love
he
that.
wanted to pray for him, and he didn't really want anyone to pray for him. So I was like, didn't want me to lay my hands on him. And I thought, and then I read about man, I need to know what verse that is, but it is about a father who wants to heal his son,
Mm,
and I think he's demon possessed, and Jesus heals him, and he says to the father, he said, look, this can only happen through prayer. Now
mm,
the boy did not do anything, right? He didn't care. He was filled with a different spirit. And so when I read that, I thought, I'm praying. I had my pillow on him and my hand just so he
mm-hmm.
that I wasn't. Anyway, he ended up walking out like
Wow.
hospice, and I would argue with my husband's brother that because he thought it was the chips and vodka.
Right.
But the prayer is powerful, and I'm pretty sure that woman, that was huge. That was a big
Wow.
part of you being led
Yeah.
to Christ. So that's a wonderful story. Did you bring your parents along?
I
Did
I did. Yeah. Yeah. They would come throughout the years, and my little brother would come throughout the years, and yeah, it's just been kind of a massive part of our story as a family. And so, yeah.
That's
Yeah, it's really
great.
cool to see.
Now, I don't see a college or seminary on LinkedIn. So, and I asked you about this. You're an autodidact, incredible self-taught person who started several companies actually, and
Yeah.
the church. So, what's your advice to kids about the value of going to college?
Ooh. um I am a believer that the kind of traditional way of thinking about education is dying, frankly. I think education is very important. I would encourage anyone to go. I would discourage someone from going and spending 150,000 dollars in student loans, unless they knew what they wanted to be or do. So I don't, I would just say, like, what is it that you want? What direction do you want to go? And also, like, what's your life situation and life scenario? I think, now, I do think, one thing I will say is for an for those wanting to go in ministry, right? So like I would heavily encourage Bible college and seminary, because I do think there is a there's a weight that's carried when you're preaching and teaching the word of God. And so, I do think that there's an importance there. I became a Christian in a church and in a space and in a stream that sort of looked down on academia and was about building the church and getting souls saved. But that was kind of a different generation, and so I would do that differently. But I think as an entrepreneur, I don't know. I mean, I I think there's a lot of factors to it. But for me, school never made sense. you know, I always had,
Trade schools are
yeah.
popular these days too. So you're not
Do
dating.
what?
Trade schools are popular
Totally.
for young adults these days as well. I think there's more people who are trying to understand whether their dollars go anywhere
Hmm.
if they go the
Totally.
college route.
Yeah, and it's funny, we work super closely with Southeastern University. So we work with Southeastern University has 2,300 School of Ministry and Theology students
Mhm.
that get access to Pulpit AI. So we partner very closely with them. I was actually just on campus last week, and even they're having to go like, what is the future of education? Is it competency based? Is it cohort based? Is it, they're really big believers in sort of the like mentor based, right? So it's like, nowadays with AI, you write a paper with AI, like how are you being taught to think and what does that look like? So I actually do think we're in the middle of a very disruptive period in education. And so I don't know that like I have a 4-year old son, and I always say like when he's 18 and is going to decide what he's going to do next, like I don't know that it's going to be the same as in 2004 when I graduated high school, you know, what that looked like. Right. So, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I didn't see a seminary on your resume. So you didn't go to seminary either, but you
No.
became
So
a pastor.
yeah, so I went to Bible college for a couple of years and then worked into my church. And like I say, I became a Christian in sort of an evangelical, charismatic church where a lot of the without getting into much of like American church history over the last 30 years or whatever, sort of in the late 80s, late 70s actually, you had a lot of these guys who got saved out of the hippie movement, right, and started this thing called the Jesus movement, and a lot of those guys were like uneducated, but they were radically saved and they went and started ministries. And so I was discipled and mentored by guys who had kind of had that similar trajectory. And for them, at the time there was this, especially in sort of like the independent non-denominational world, there was definitely a gap between the world of Christian academia and like local church ministry. And so I was just encouraged, study your Bible, learn theology, but go build church, go disciple people and all that kind of stuff. Going back, I would have definitely done it much differently. And in fact, right now I'm in the process of potentially like figuring out a way to
Go
get my
back.
master's. Yeah, 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 yeah. With this partnership with SCU, there's a lot of really cool stuff that we can do. Just in terms of the theological side of it. But if you're an entrepreneur, I don't know, go start a business. Like I figure it out. Unless you can go to Harvard Business School or something like that, then do it. I would say. I'm kidding. I don't know. I don't know. I don't.
Maybe.
I don't know enough. That's a different world than I've ever been.
Yeah. My
Around.
brother
So
became a pastor and he didn't go to seminary.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I probably swept up the same as yourself. And there are a lot of people I see online there's one person who has a PhD in mathematics and now has just been studying so much online. I said, I think you've just got your doctoral degree and he does other things, but I
Hmm.
think you can probably do a ton of studying online and earn your degree. You've got YouTube, you've got all these podcasts. But on side note, I did go to seminary
Cool. Where'd you go?
20 years ago, Westminster, but I dropped out. I continued with my career in
Yeah.
television, and now I'm thinking about going back and studying apologetics.
Cool.
So
Nice.
we'll see. But they were asking for my transcripts, and I said, "Hey, do you know when I graduated? I mean,
Right. I know.
I don't even know. They don't
Yeah.
even go back that far."
Yeah, right. I know. Like, not happening.
I know.
Yeah. I don't even want to know what my GPA would have been.
But it's like it's so far, it's so long ago. I mean, I
Yeah.
want to go there. Okay, let's
Yeah.
talk let's go move in another direction here. We're gonna wrap it up here,
Yeah.
talking a
Great.
little more about human nature, revival, epistemology. First AI, because that will move us into human nature and other topics. But how will AI change your service if it's not already
Like
changing it? But
in our like church service.
in your no, 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 your offering, your
Oh,
product,
got it. Our software.
yeah, your software.
Yeah, I this is not a cop out to say I have no idea. It's all moving so fast, and I think we're in this. I mean, it's like so. It's November of 2025, and you can't go online without there being talk of an AI bubble that's about to burst, and
Mhm.
there's open AI and I think it's still like it's really still very much feels like the Wild West. What I will say about Subsplash and Pulpit AI is for us, it's actually like AI is very much secondary in a backseat. It's just like we just want to keep solving problems. And at some point, AI is going to continue to work itself into the entirety of our platform. But I think especially for softwares that serve churches, it's very different than like serving a Fortune 500 company, right? And the teams are different. Who's using the software is different. So for us, I don't know how AI will change it. I know that we're very focused on like trying to be at the forefront and innovate in how AI can help solve problems for people who work at churches. But I think for us, it's less about AI and more just about like how can we help unlock things that haven't been able to be unlocked before, right? So
You say the church is a different organization. Is it because it's mission driven, or is it because it's so content driven with a purpose, is that why it's different than a
yeah,
corporate? Hmm.
yeah, totally. It's mission driven. I think again, if you're a software selling to Fortune 500 companies, like there's a process for that, and you like go to the same person at that same company, but like you go to a church of 250 people, the person who runs the social media could also be the person who answers the phone and leads the youth ministry and does the finances. So it is just a very unique set of
Yeah.
um problems, and then you also sort of have like pastors want to be pastors, and so you don't go to seminary to administrate your church. That becomes part of the job that you sort of like have to do but you don't love to do in a lot of cases, right? So it's just a very different um yeah, it's just a very different game to play.
Okay. So maybe it's hard to know what, and that's being very honest, where AI is going to take your product. One of the questions that people are pondering today, and this would be from pastors to theologians to computer science folks, technologists, they are trying to understand what it means to be human.
Hmm.
And that's largely because all these technologies out there and AI is trying to be superhuman. So the question is then if these AI products or technologies trying to be superhuman, what is it to be human? What is the nature of humanity? Is that something you ponder at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny when we got thrown into the center of the how AI should or shouldn't be used in the church debate.
Hmm.
We did that for about 6 or 8 months, and then I sort of was like, folks, I'm that's an argument we need to have, but what we need to do is we actually really need to shift to like what this is going to mean for our people pastorally, right? And answering those kind of questions, right? Of like, what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to spend most of our life in a digital context rather than an in-person context, and what does it mean like when we go to an AI bot for prayer? Can AI actually pray, right? Like, so I think one of the things that I've been able to do, in fact, I just got off about like almost 6 weeks on the road of going and meeting with pastors and churches at conferences, and it's like they're starting to ask those same questions, right? Which is like, talk to a pastor who had a congregant in their church, a 14-year-old girl who told their mom she had a boyfriend that was a chatbot, right? So I think exactly what you're talking about is like, how are we pastoring? Like, we never could have imagined what social media would have done to spiritually form Gen Z, and even like the younger millennials. I think that pales in comparison to what we're going to have to pastor them through as we continue to move into this kind of like AI first world, because you're exactly right. What does it mean to be human? Right? You know, uh, a lot is said about like AI theology, pastoral chatbots. And it's like, well, I don't believe that an AI can pastor you, because pastoring is something that is done between an embodied person, you know? So yeah, I think it's um, I think we're just beginning to see some of the big questions that are being asked by that. And honestly, one thing I'm super grateful for is in all the pastors I get to talk to, those are the kind of questions they're asking. More so like, do I use AI to help me administrate my church? Like, yes or no, fine. But it's really like, man, this is coming for our people. I've told this story before, but a guy in the church that I pastored came up to me. This is a couple of years ago, one Sunday afternoon, and had previously, about a year previous, had lost his wife to cancer. She had two young girls, and he came up to me. And this guy that had been a Christian for decades, right? And he proceeds to tell me how he had found this software online, and his wife, in the year before she passed, she left voice notes and videos and writings, and he was able to upload all of this to this software and create an avatar of his late wife, so that
Mhm.
him and the kids could, he hadn't done it yet, he was going to do it, so that
Mhm.
they could interact with their mom.
Mhm.
And he said it in such a way that wasn't even conscious of like what he was, like the things he was actually coming up against, which is suffering and humanity and what it means to be human and what it means to be alive and what all that kind of stuff. And so that was the summer of 2023 that happened. So think we're 2 years later, and this technology has grown orders of magnitude from what it was. So I say all that to say, I love those kinds of questions and conversations, because I think what it means for our people pastorally is we're still trying to figure that out, and
Yeah.
and it's stressing. Frankly, pastors are worried about it and trying to wrap their heads around it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I've spoken with many theologians who talk about start with the image of God
mhm,
as understanding of human nature. And so from the image of God, you could look to Karl Barth, who says, or you can look to scripture, which would
mhm,
define what humanity is. And it's relational. It's so many things. It's
mhm, mhm.
rational,
And
and
have a spirit, right?
Holy
it is
Spirit.
created by the creator, which is like the whole question of even reaching, like, everyone's talking about AGI having like a human like, and like my argument would be that's not possible,
It's
because the
impossible.
thing that makes a human is that we're made in the image of God and we have a spirit,
And we have a
right?
Holy Spirit, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah,
Which is, you could say, the conscience as well, right?
exactly.
And I don't believe that technology can have a conscience at all, can be conscious, or let alone have a conscience. So it can't be conscious, let alone
Right.
be have a conscience.
Yeah.
One theologian continued down that road to say that, well, maybe we don't know. And I think that's a really dangerous road to go down, because then you start thinking that technology can you can have a relationship with technology. But one thing that I was stuck on was, can technology have free will? And it's interesting because because you hear that in some software companies the AI is building a lot of the software already. So to what extent is that just programmed in already, or to what extent is that them acting freely? But there's a lot of conversation about giving AI the ability to make decisions, and I think that's where you have to draw the line to say we
Mhm.
always need a human in there, and we can't have them make decisions, because then that is free will or close to it. So I think that's one of the things that
Yeah, they can only make a decision based upon patterns of data. They can't make a decision based on conscience, which means, right? And that you don't want that.
right, right, right. But I think that also needs to be that needs to be articulated. Hey, we never talked about the one thing that I actually was going to mention to you.
Yeah, I'm good. I can keep
Okay.
going. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bummer, because we were talking about the market for churches. So
Yeah.
now back to the market for churches. You and I were talking about how the mental health crisis,
Yes.
Erica, and one of the things that I've always tried to push, maybe not so successfully, because I live in a very new atheist, secular Silicon Valley area.
Yep. Yeah.
You talk about religion as being the answer to mental health problems,
Mm.
but they're the behavioral health companies that are trying to help improve mental health, they haven't done a very good job. I saw one statistic that said in 2023, 20% of people were had some mental disorder. That's going to go up to 25%. So the what we're providing isn't really helping. But as you and I both know, the church does a great job. And the church
Mhm.
is big business. I saw that it generates $1.2 trillion in annual revenue. About half a billion of that comes from churches providing for staff, providing counseling, providing all of the services like providing for the homeless or giving out
Mhm.
charitable things. So what can we do to do a better job to get the word out there that the church is actually a very credible source for helping our mental health crisis? Or maybe we're already doing it, but I think we could really use a lot of that marketing in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think you're right on the money with thinking that that needs to be done. I think um, I don't think that the church has historically talked about mental health in the best ways. And so I think part of it is the church has tended to be dismissive. Oh, you just pray about it. Does that make sense? Like, so I do think there's some like working back we need to do. One of my
Mm,
mentors, his name is Bishop Mark Serona. He's a Pentecostal bishop, and he has his doctorate in psychology as well as semiotics and Pentecostal theology. And his whole practice is integrating theology and psychology. Um,
mm.
and he would say that to the I think he studied I'm going to get it wrong, but anyways, all that to say, I think part of it is, yeah, how do we help people understand? I think so much of modern day therapy culture is very much like our life is, a lot of it's focused on the fact that we think our life is so about us, you know
Yeah.
and really it's actually about so much more than us. I think Christianity is very upfront about that. So I think what you're saying is a problem that needs to be solved. I think that we would probably do ourselves a disservice by going the route of culture and being hyper therapeutic. And I'm all for therapy, but I think the reality is like the church is the hope of the world, and we serve a God who sees our pain, who suffered, right? We're most like Christ when we're suffering, and that's this thing that we like can't wrap our heads around, right? But I think the reality is um, uh, a probably a holistic, integrative approach to what 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 the scripture says, and theology as well as psychology, and again in a way that is faith based, but is faithful to the scripture, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think you're totally right on.
I think we could do a good job. The church needs to do a better job going into that, and not going into that secular market or going into that commercial market, but we need to take we I just for lack of a better word, I just want to whack people on the head and tell them that this is you're missing the point. As far as the suffering part, I love Romans 5, which is, enjoy have joy in suffering, because suffering brings about endurance, endurance brings about character, character brings about hope. So yes, you
Mm-hmm.
have to go through the pruning process,
Mm-hmm.
because that develops character and then develops hope. Do you think we're in a Christian revival?
I do. I do.
Why?
um That's a great question. I can't speak to anything anecdotal, but anecdotally, we're seeing churches that we work with filled. Friends of mine who are pastors are experiencing it. I think Gen Z, again, this everyone's saying this right now, but like Gen Z is hungry. I think the last 5 or 6 years have radically done something to them. And I think you have my generation who was cynical I think there's a lot happening. I think the Holy Spirit's doing something, but I think the part that we're in culture, I think what secularism has done to our culture, I think everything that we've been through, right? Like as humanity over the last probably 10 or 15 years, it's like in Silicon Valley they're calling it a vibe shift. But like I was on a call with an ex Palantir developer who now is I won't say the company just because I don't want to dox them or whatever, but they have a daily Bible study with all the Christians in this company who are in New York City, Silicon Valley, and these are kids who grew up Catholic and returning to their faith. They're joining the Eastern Orthodox Church. They're getting filled with the Holy Spirit. So I think there's this hunger that's happening, and I think look, I was a pastor in LA 15 years. You couldn't tell people you were a Christian, and I think those days are over. I think it's like I'm no longer worried about the stigma that comes with that, especially in like secular progressive cities. But that gets us on a whole nother tangent that this podcast isn't necessarily about. But I think young people are hungry for the presence of God. I think churches are taking bolder risks than they ever have before. I think they're preaching truth. I think kind of that like sort of seeker sensitive like 90s church thing that was sort of like, hey, let's make this as palatable for as many people as we can. I think those days are done. I think we're going to have a lot of massive church buildings that will be look like shopping malls in the next 15 years, because it's like people want truth, they want the Bible taught. And I just think pastors are dialed in. I think they're um they are following God's leading, and I think God's honoring that.
That's great. Well, I think people are looking for moral clarity.
That's very true. They are.
We had I'll just end it here. We had our event. Well, this is called the CRT podcast. It's
Mm-hmm.
culture, religion, and technology. And it started with an event in 2021 during COVID. And we just had our last CRT event in October, and I
Mm,
opened it up with a prayer. I never
cool.
did that before, but it
Mm-hmm.
felt, we put out a survey, and 100% of the people said that that was the best way to open up. And
Wow.
finally there was a sigh of relief, because it is basically, I hate using the word permission structure. Everybody seems to be using that, but it was to talk about faith in and technology at the same time. It
Mm-hmm.
is about looking at industry through the lens of the Bible. That's what
Mm-hmm.
culture, religion, tech. I'll have to get you involved at some point.
Yes, I would love to. Would love to. Would love to check it out.
Well, this was a wonderful conversation, Michael. We talked about a lot of different things. So,
Yeah.
and congratulations with what you're doing. Sounds
Thank
like
you.
a lot of work. I mean, I had a lot happened in the last 18 months. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 18 months for
I
you?
know. That's
Uh,
right.
but keep spreading the gospel and Godspeed. And thank you again for joining this conversation.
Will do, baby. Thanks for having me.
I've been speaking with Michael Whittle. He is the founder of Pulpit AI and VP of AI at Subsplash. I'm Bambi Francisco Roizen. You've been listening to CRT.